Morning, everyone. It's a rarity to be introduced by a fellow Belgian. It appears to me that over the centuries, the paradigm of architect as master builder has been eroded drastically, and that today the profession has been marginalized and architects have lost a lot of control over the building process. As an architect, you know that from the initial sketch that you draw at the onset of the project, you lose control at every step of the way until the building is built. You have to convince the client of the design, then you have to get approval from the authorities, then you often have to value engineer the project. Finally, the builder comes in the picture and after take over the process and may use us as a scapegoat when an error occurs. Our role has been diminished and our fee has been diluted by many other professionals such as the project manager. However, our liability has grown where the risk versus the reward makes little business sense. Architects carries a brunt of the liability while having very limited control over the final build and the least lucrative fee of the development. This represents a fairly bleak picture of the industry. However, architects are in a great position if they choose to add services to their repertoire. We can self-perform the construction, and we can act as developer on certain projects. This will diversify our practices, reduce the length of inactivity during recession, since construction is already funded when a recession starts, and design picks up first when the market recovers. It also allows the architect to benefit from a lucrative developer role during market expansions. Furthermore, architects have quite a few other advantages from developers. We have an intrinsic knowledge of regulations, construction materials and methods, and we are very familiar with the needs and aspiration of potential buyers and tenants. In the optic of trying to retain more control over the process and the quality of the build, we decided to have a more hands-on approach to the profession and went into design build. Over the past decade, we have invested some of our fee into selected projects and have started a development arm to our operation. In this presentation, I want to take you through our development process as well as illustrate our effort through selected projects. There are 6 main steps we undertake for development: site selection and picking an asset type, feasibility study, financial modeling, team selection, project approval, construction, and sales and marketing. The site selection is one of the most vital components of the process. Getting a great value for the land will create much more beneficial return. Architects have the advantage of being able to easily, expeditiously perform feasibility study and to assess the highest and best use for a site. We're also better positioned to deal with a site that have complex zoning, difficult topography, floodplain, critical water zone, protected vegetation, etc., etc. Furthermore, we can access the city website where we can see the site plans that have been submitted and in which area, allowing us to see where the city is growing. We're continuously researching different sites in and around Austin where we practice. We create initial property assessment, which allows us to define the size of the project and the best asset type for the location. This represents one of those assessments. For the past few years, we've been focusing on what we perceive as recession-proof assets, such as affordable housing, senior housing, student housing, and data centers. As architects, we've dealt with many different types of asset class. The familiarity of different project types allows us to be more versatile than most developers. The feasibility study. Once we have both site and asset in mind, we negotiate the terms of sale. We have a real estate agent in our office whom helps us running comps, writing LOIs and sales contracts. This has been instrumental in the speed of execution of these offers. We try to have an extended closing in order to perform an intense feasibility study, which includes all limiting factors of the development, such as the parking requirement, impervious cover, fire limit, water quality and detention requirement, etc., etc. We also perform a site analysis to understand better the surrounding amenities of the site. This feasibility was done for a 9% tax credit project, and so this is a kind of a zoning map that we're researching. And this is kind of a close-up looking at the site itself with water quality, vegetation requirements, and views. And then this site shows all the amenities around the site, such as school, restaurant, transportation, etc., which are critical to receiving the tax credit award. As a developer, self-performing the feasibility study allows us to study multiple sites concurrently and start the financial modeling. Understanding the source of funding and the pro forma is probably the part that the architect is the least familiar with the development process and requires a steep learning curve, especially on the first project. Raising equity through investors and securing debt from lenders are two major tasks from a developer that an architect has little experience with. It requires fostering relationship with bankers and investors. This slide shows the complexity of source of funding for an affordable housing project in East Austin, where private equity, public funds, and private debt collide into this giant mess. Architects do have an important advantage on the equity portion of the funds. We're a large portion of the soft cost of the project, and we are able to parlay this sweat equity from a main stake of the ownership of the development. This is a substantial advantage since the soft cost at the beginning part of the project is the most expensive to raise since it is the riskiest. Furthermore, the sweat equity from an architect can be used as a down payment for the construction loan, therefore reducing the equity raise by the value of the sweat equity times 2. A developer fee will add an additional 3 to 5% of the total project cost as a fee. Performing the construction can add 7% to 15% of the fee of the architect. Then representing the sale or lease can add 2 to 3% on the listing side. This represents a completely vertically integrated process. Of course, any of these tasks can be subcontracted. This next slide shows the financial modeling for a creative office we're doing in East Austin. I'm not going to go through the numbers, but we typically structure those in overall project summaries that states the assumption of rents, where the debt, how the debt is allocated, and the return for investors. We go through the investment structure, what's the source of funds, and the cap rate target, and then the project assumptions such as construction cost and areas, and then the last one being cash flow and NOI analysis, which leads to the valuation of the asset. Team selection and project approval. Another key advantage from an architect is our consultant resources. At additional liability risk, we are required by the developer to hire most consultants of the project on behalf of the developer. However, this gives us the power of the purse amongst our consultants, which should lead to a more favorable negotiation for our own project. We are also much better positioned to select the right consultant depending on the asset type and the scale of the project. Having the right relationship with our consultant can mean an important time saving. In regard to the project approval, the developer tend to be viewed as an outsider to the community. Architects have a better relationship with the public the public sector and the community. This allows us to speed up the regulatory approval. Architects also have a much better command on negotiation needed for the city approval than a developer. This is a significant advantage in securing permitting that the developer has to entrust in the design team. Acting as an architect developer allows us to assess the risk of authority approval much better. This convoluted chart shows the intricacy of the team selection for affordable housing project. Once the building project is approved, we often self-perform the construction. Self-performing construction allows an architect to control better the outcome of the final building while improving the economics of the project. Builder fees tend to be far superior to an architect's fee for often a similar effort. Performing the construction allows us to mitigate dispute at the onset versus being dragged in litigations that we have little control over. Furthermore, our knowledge of building can be far superior than a builder, and we have control of the documents that can help us with the cost estimation and BIM process. Building or design also allows us to push the envelope and experiment with new construction technique and material. This is a slide of our current office under construction. This was in 2008. Typical steel frame construction versus the spec house we recently finished, where we're using this massive 3-ton stacked block walls, limestone walls from the quarry. It represent two very different type of construction that we're able to pursue because we're doing our own project. The final stage is the sales and marketing. As architect, we control two critical aspects of marketing the project, the content and the narrative. Regarding the content, architects produce all images, models, animation, and VR used to market the project. Our office is invested heavily in software, 3D printing, VR, and drone technology, all with the goal of producing more compelling graphics and content. Having powerful visual is critical to the success of a development. For some reason, there's some slide that they don't like. This slide that you can't see shows the efforts that we're doing to market a building, and we are using VR technology and other source to be able to make the investor and potential tenant visualize the project. Okay. Most architects have established relationship with writer, blogger, publisher, architectural photographer, all of which are critical to get exposure needed for the development. Now I'd like to illustrate the process with actual project. The key to this project is the flexibility of our service between just being an architect versus a design builder versus design builder, developer, and agent. Like everything else in life, it's helpful to learn from small bets. With that in mind, our first project was actually my house. This allows us to be the client, the architect, as well as the builder. With this manageable scale, we were able to learn the full spectrum of the building process. The house is located in South Austin and is composed of 2 pavilions, staggered and pushed to the setback of the property, revealing a large back patio. The structure was designed around this tree to shade the eastern exposure. The house is composed of exposed steel frame, which enables us to maximize the openings toward the garden. The floor-to-ceiling glazing blurs the boundary between the indoors and the outdoors. Where the 2 volumes overlap is placed a central water court. The 2 pavilions are connected by a bridge over the water feature. The light reflects off the water, glass, and acrylic panel, creating a layering effect, which is slightly destabilizing and further erases the boundaries between the interior and exterior space. The steel frame is on a rigid 16-foot module, therefore matching typical panel size of 4x8 milling dimension to reduce waste and labor. The steel and the wall panels were all prefabricated to maximize the speed of construction. We used plywood instead of sheetrock to line the walls, bringing warmth to the interior. In the center of which wing is located a red and blue volume, like organs within the skeletal frame. They contain all plumbing and mechanical system, which help further reduce waste and inefficiencies. The house has quite a few Moorish influences, not unlike the colors and the use of water at the Major Garden on your left, on your right. We also love the way North African culture uses water to cool the space, both physically and psychologically. The sound of water becomes a white noise to shield the space from the noisy souk, or in our own case, the loud street. We were also inspired by Moorish architecture use of rooftop terrace, where one can escape the chaos of Moroccan city, catch the prevailing breeze, and enjoy alfresco dining without being bothered by insects. The crudely stretched canvas provide a well-needed shade. The frame construction is inspired from Japanese constructivist principles. The expression of the armature is reinforced by the clear contrast of the frame versus the infill panels. The construction process and sequence become obvious and celebrated. The acrylic panel that line the interior organs of the house are backlit in a Dan Flavin-like manner, creating an abstraction of the surface and therefore of the space. Since the house has large amount of glass, we rely on vegetation to create privacy. We also convert the garage into a lantern for the front yard. This diagram represents the many sustainable features of the project. Considering that the exterior walls are over 50% glazing, we relied on multiple shading devices, such as the trellis of the front of the house, the rooftop canvas, and the strategic placement of deciduous tree to help mitigate the hot summer month. In the series of improbable renovation, this is by far one of the most ambitious. The project started with a poorly constructed builder home on one of the most spectacular lots on Lake Austin, with over 250 feet of curving lakefront. The challenge of the project was to reconnect the house with the incredible view of the lake. In order to do so, we propped up the entire house on steel frame, so we could open up the walls of the ground floor. We simplified the roof line and extended it to shade the harsh western exposure. We also minimized the overbearing chimney by stripping them of the original brick and sheathing them in glass. These are a few images of the before and after. As you can see, it was a pretty dreadful house. It was a pretty drastic renovation. This is the same patio. The pool wrapped around the house, bringing the view of the water even closer to the interior space. The new steel frame supports the upper floor, is pushed to the outside of the existing house, allowing for an easier install of the new structure. The sliding glass door at the pool cabana rests in the water, merging the house and the pool. The attic was converted in 2 extra bedrooms and a library. The wood floor wraps on the wall and ceiling, creating the feeling of the hull of a boat. The existing dormer is flanked by red acrylic panel to brighten the space and emphasize the depth of the structure. The natural light picks up the red hue, not unlike James Turrell installations. The lakefront wall is completely disappeared. The ceiling continues outside over the pool and is covered with the same copper as the roof. The ripples of the reflecting pool create a dancing pattern on the ceiling. The pool cabana or solarium is a hybrid room where you feel both inside and outside at the same time. The glass ceiling makes the room even more open. The corner of the room opens directly onto the pool, and the water surrounding you makes one feel being on a peninsula. These 3 houses were design-build spec house in East Austin that we finished in 2009. Not a great timing to finish a spec project. They were designed as tall, narrow structure facing the lake in order to capture both prevailing breeze and the vistas of downtown from the rooftop. We use vertical épais siding to accentuate the height of the building. A Corbusier-like staircase connects the upper floor to the roof. The upper floor launches toward the lake with a suspended structure. The roof is sloped in such a way that the rain creates a water current similar to the sinkhole in Central Texas. And you'll see we have a reference to Texas geology in quite a few of our projects. This was a design-build project for a Texan lobbyist couple that wanted to entertain on their boat dock. For this reason, we designed a boat dock on 2 stories that include a screen-in porch. We added a waterfall to shield the space from the noise of the boating on the lake. The geometry of the boathouse is a perfect oval to mimic the curvature of the river bend. The second floor is connected by a curving ramp that further reinforces the shape of the structure. The glass railing disappears to leave a vista unobstructed, and the copper screening porch contains a built-in sofa and furniture to cater to political events. The Cascading Creek House. This house takes its name from the site itself. The pie-shaped lot faces a creek with a series of small waterfalls. We use the extensive 3,000-gallon water collection system to recreate the feel of the creek throughout the property. The house is organized in 2 wings, one public and one private, that fan out. The entry is pinched while the house is open up to the view of the creek, following a Frank Lloyd Wright principle of the compression is release. The water is captured on a tray of the roof and cascade in the front pond that greets the visitor. It then flows through the entry and beyond to the pool. The exterior walls are made of large sheets of limestone that rise out of the ground as the topography of the lot falls. The roof line of the house launches toward the creek to shade the harsh sun and cover an outdoor patio. It is all suspended, and you can't see the suspension because it's recessed. The glass rises in front of the roof structure, minimizing the fascia of the facade to a few inches. The 2 wings enclose a large outdoor entertainment space that include an outdoor kitchen, outdoor dining area and lounge, a large pool, and sun deck. The entry of the house is shielded by a steel roof designed like an airplane wing and opened with an oculus. The edge glass provides natural light while retaining privacy from the entry courtyard. We constructed a custom door with green onyx stone that contrasts with the starkness of the edge glass. The interior cascades down with the topography of the site, with the roof line staying constant level, creating a variation of height of the spaces. These variations help us create a more intimate space for dining versus more formal space for the living room. It also helps us keep a direct connection with the yard from all interior spaces. The owner of the house is a tech enthusiast, so we're able to push the envelope with sustainability and home automation. Beyond the 30,000-gallon water collection system, sized for 45 days drought, which happens a lot in Texas, we included new strategies for energy conservation, production, and storage. The geothermal wells and the thermal panels on the roof are both tied to a hydronic system that cools and heats the house with 65% more efficiency than a conventional system. We added a 16-kilowatt PV panel system on the roof that reduced greatly the city electric load. Finally, all of this system can dump energy through loops in the shell of the pool, functioning basically as an evaporative cooling tower. This house started with an enlightened client, lawyer by day and sci-fi writer by night. His progressive nature allowed us to push the envelope like we hadn't been able to before. His requirement, other than a conversation about a book called Bunker Archaeology, was to have maximum privacy from the street, a limited house program, and an emphasis on remediation of this industrial site in East Austin. The house started with a massive excavation to unearth a decommissioned Chevron pipeline in order to vacate a utility easement. The scar in the land made us think of the first sedentary settlement in the plains called the Pit House. These partially dug up houses were designed by the Indian to use thermal mass of the ground and to insulate better their dwelling. It also limited the amount of material needed to construct for the construction to a few branches and a thatch for the roof. All versions made of steel beam and green roof, but kept the archetype intact. The house geometry was also inspired by origami folds. We sketched multiple iterations of different folding techniques before arriving at the final form. The bedroom is separated from the living quarters by a narrow canyon that channels the breeze from the lake. As the topography of the land falls, the house rises out of the ground and opens up toward the lake. The end of the triangular geometry is hollowed by a pool with a zero edge. We used pretty sizable steel beam to support the heavy green roof, which allowed us to limit the number of support and open each wing of the house to each other. The owner liked the idea of having a public wing of the house completely separated from the private wing, forcing him to engage the outdoor to reach his bedroom. Interior height of the space varies from 7 feet to 16 feet, making the space both monumental and intimate at the same time. As you can see, even so the house is partially buried, it does not feel cavernous thanks to the floor-to-ceiling windows. Very much like the previous project, we combined geothermal and hydronics to increase the efficiency of the house. Since the house is partially buried, the earth at 4 feet depth is close to a 68 degree. Heating and cooling the house was reduced significantly because of that. The main difference with the previous house was the ambitious green roof that covers the whole structure. The green roof has many advantages beyond the added insulation value. Central Texas is prone to flooding, and green roof can reduce drastically water runoff. Furthermore, it reduced the heat island effect that afflicts most cities by reducing radiant heat back to the atmosphere. Finally, it provides an urban habitat to the local fauna and flora. We collaborated with the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center to engineer a soil type and to select 55 local varietal of perennial wildflower and grasses with the role of recreating the Texas prairie that has been disappearing at an alarming rate. This spec house was based on a courtyard house common in Mexican modernism. It was designed as a compound of several volumes organized around the pool. The walls of the ground floor are made of pour-in-place concrete and are in direct contrast with the cantilevering frame of the upper floor. The cedar formwork used for the concrete was then reused for the siding of the upper floor, eliminating waste typical in concrete pours. It also created some continuity in the design by reinforcing the same rhythm of coursing. The footprint is rotated 20 degrees so the house can take better advantage of the downtown views and create a more dynamic street facade. Other than the Frank Lloyd Wright-like coursing, to reinforce the horizontality, we also followed its use of the 4x4 rigid grid in both plan and elevation as a common thread to the design. The cedar siding is rotated vertically to emphasize the height and to contrast with the horizontal coursing. We use a natural compound to oxidize the cedar siding. This silvering effect gives a sense of permanency and protects the wood of any future decay. The house is a split level to follow the contour of the site and increase the head height of the living room. The ceiling cove contains all the indirect lighting and draws your eyes to the exterior. Bold Ruler House. This is a spec house we recently completed, where we used massive 3-tone limestone block straight from the local quarry as bearing wall. The house is inspired by geological formation of cantilevering cliffs along some of the streams of Central Texas. The use of limestone block is also a historical reference to the German settlers in the area and the use of masonry. Limestone thermal mass is such that the temperature of the house is regulated even in the hot Texas summer month. The block also regulate the humidity by absorbing excess humidity and releasing it in dry periods. The limestone stone walls are set perpendicular to the slope of the site and delineate different areas of the house while orienting the residents to the vistas of the valley. They're also used as massive privacy shield. The roughness of the stone gives a certain ruin-like quality and contrasts with the slick window system, plaster, and wood flooring. The pool was designed to emulate the vernal ponds located in Central Texas. These are two spec houses we recently completed that are configured around 4 courtyards at each cardinal point. The top of the structure is composed of corten steel, while the base is composed of wall plaster, creating a drastic contrast. The streaks of the rusting steel becomes like a modern Texas wabi-sabi. The depth of the facade was accentuated by turning the walls of the ground floor in at the opening, giving a more substantial feeling of depth from the outside. The houses feature large rooftop decks that are shielded for privacy and shade with perforated steel screens. The steel has 2 different perforation patterns, creating a pointillistic composition. The interior space is simple white box with darkened concrete floor with a walnut touch on the cabinetry. This spec house was designed in collaboration with a well-traveled real estate agent. As the name informs us, the house was inspired by the Moorish architecture of Morocco. It is a simple white plaster structure with a walled-in courtyard similar to the Riyadh in North Africa. We use Musharabia screen to help shade the opening and add privacy to the bedroom space. The use of water at the center of the courtyard engaged the senses and cooled the residence. The stretched canvas helped cool the roof deck. The whitewashed plaster walls pick up the shadow pattern of the large pecan in the courtyard. An accessory dwelling unit was placed in the back of the property and can be rented individually. The wide epoxy floor and the simple composition, the interior feels like a carved white box. A touch of color is introduced with the artwork, the wraparound seating, and the furniture. So this concludes all the single-family project, and at some point we jump in scale to multifamily in this case and commercial buildings. The Skybridge Loft is a 120-unit condo complex in South Austin. The townhouse were pushed the pyramid of the lot in order to maximize the central park in the middle of the property. Large bridge span the courtyard and entry of the project, creating an interesting elevated unit. The rhythm of the facade is generated from the thin walls, separating each unit for shading and privacy purposes. I can guarantee you that the pastel color was definitely not a recommendation. We added a 1 mile long hike and bike trail around the perimeter for the residents. This is our first foray in affordable housing. Lucero is a 9% tax credit project with 173 units in South Austin. For this project, we were both the architect and the tax credit HUD coordinator. The project is organized around a U shape facing downtown, as you can see. The massing cascades down toward downtown, not unlike a Mediterranean village, to help frame the views, lower the scale toward the neighborhood, and break down the scale of the building. We use bright color to animate the space and help the residents and visitors navigate the long corridors. The colors were picked from Chucho Reyes, who inspired Barragan for his choice of color. The corridors are pushed away from the wall of the unit, allowing natural light to penetrate to the ground floor of the complex. This canyon eliminates the typical dark hallway that are consistent in social housing. We involved the community of the building to create murals and events, which has created a sense of belonging and pride for the residents. This has helped tremendously reducing graffiti and vandalism in the complex. We developed, designed, and built this mixed-use building in East Austin. The project was 2 retail space on the ground floor, or office on the second floor, and 2 residential units on the 3rd floor. We used corn steel as the main material of the building for cost reasons and durability. The steel requires 0 maintenance, and the oxidation layer protects the steel for decades to come. The geometry of the building is based on geological formation of Central Texas. The back side of the building facing the single-family neighborhood was based on the erosion pattern called exfoliation. It occurs when the granite uplift reduces the pressure of the stone, which then induces fractures in the slab-like formation. This cascading effect reduces the scale of the building toward the neighborhood and creates a generous terraces. The front facade takes a little bit of a different approach because we face the urban corridor and takes its fuel from water erosion pattern that happens in the creeks. River erodes the base of the canyon, creating cantilever and grotto. The angle of the building were created to respond to the surrounding historic buildings, such as the Capitol and several churches. Each face of the building is oriented perpendicular to this landmark, making the user aware of its context. We developed, designed, and built a mixed-use condo project in East Austin in the middle of the last recession. We wanted a building that was playful, had strong identity, and was affordable. We were inspired by the work of Helio Oiticica, a Brazilian artist, and his matrix of floating wood color panels. These panels became the genesis for balconies and shading system. The building has a full panoramic view of downtown. However, the western exposure needed an extensive shading system. We thought this element could become the identity of the building while making the building function better. The retail at the base of the building is composed of 10 stores encased in glass, with the steel structure recessed, giving the impression that the building is hovering above the ground. The upper floor consists of 22 residential units and a roof garden for the community. The building is highly modular with an efficient 16-foot by 32-foot module. These modules are paired and stacked to create different sizes of ranging unit, from a micro unit to a fairly large 3-bedroom. This variety of unit types attracted a diverse demographic to the building, from student to young family to empty nesters. This is a close-up of the railing Brise Soleil, where you can see the slight color variation of the panel and the shadow pattern it creates. The powder-coated steel panels are held together by a steel cable, so they appear as they are floating in front of the facade. The entry of the building is a large 2-story bridge containing 4 residential units, propped up by 6 large struts. The rooftop of the bridge becomes a community gathering space facing views of downtown. We wanted the building to be as green as the budget could permit. Other than passive cooling strategy of the Brise Soleil, we added extensive green roof on the top on the 3rd floor. We placed PV panel on the roof, and we altered the buried detention pond to become a water collection tank for the irrigation purposes. The Skylight Cinema is an art cinema we designed in Bentonville, Arkansas, in collaboration with the Walton family. It is a complex of 6 theaters with high-end DLP technology projection and better F&B offering. The material palette of poured-in-place concrete and copper panels was based on the Crystal Bridges Museum, designed by Safdie down the street from our project. The simple copper volume enclosed the main 2 auditoria and rise above the rest of the structure in order to give more presence to the building. The copper box is surrounded by a loggia containing the concession area, the bar, the circulation, and ticketing. The loggia is lower to bring the scale of the building down to a friendlier pedestrian scale. The random concrete fin both shield the glass and create covered area for benches, bike racks, and gathering spaces. The structural steel fascia allows us to keep a minimal roof profile. In the interior, the copper box is separated from the loggia by a narrow skylight, bringing natural light deep inside the building. It also allows both volumes to coexist while keeping their own identity. Forsyth Coda is a high-end condo project we just started with the collaboration of the Circuit of the Americas. The project has 6 phases and includes a 13-story condo tower, townhouses, and a car club at the center of the track. The tower is shaped in a V to maximize the view of the track. It offers generous balcony for better viewing of the race. The townhouses at the base of the building shield a 3-story garage designed as a car museum. The top of the garage contains most of the common amenities, including pool, spa, clubhouse, and gym. The upper floor of the tower contains a large restaurant and event space. The residential project is combined with a car club, for which the resident can race exotic car when the track is available 50 days out of the year. The cars will be housed in an octagonal glass tower where a car elevator automates the parking. We have been pre-selling the condo and hope to be under construction middle of next year. This is by far our largest endeavor. This is the backyard, which is composed of 2 million square feet of development west of Austin in a community called Bee Cave. It contains the redevelopment of a historic outdoor music venue of the same name, where musicians such as Willie Nelson have performed numerous times. The project includes large office space, 3 data centers, a boutique hotel, in addition to the music venue. It is a highly sustainable project where we are generating our own power through a mini power plant operating a hydrogen cell fuel powering microturbines. The development focused on limiting the amount of flat work for parking by concentrating the parking in 2 main structures, leaving 75% of the ground to nature. The design takes cue from the fractured landscape of Central Texas to break down the massive scale of the project. The floor plates' width are narrowed to bring natural light in all spaces of the project. The undesirable element of the project, such as the parking structure and the data center, are nestled and shielded through depression in the landscape or covered by green roof to minimize the impact on the community. And this is where the small bets on the single family becomes really important to us, because we've performed this so we can bring them to a bigger scale and a more commercial scale. This is a view of the office. The project is going under construction in the end of 2019. This is an aerial view of the second phase of the project, which is an additional 600,000 square feet of office. As you can see, the site is quite pristine and delicate. The complexity of the project has been quite challenging. Even the mating season of the golden cheek warbler has to be considered in the construction schedule. Ethan's view is the multi-family component of the backyard, and is composed of 70 condo and 16 townhouses. The exposed concrete frame is infilled by floor-to-ceiling glazing and volcanic basalt from the Central Valley of Mexico. The townhouses stagger to follow the contour of the site and create privacy between units. We added wood siding within the concrete frame to soften the facade. Each unit contains deep balcony to allow for outdoor dining and entertaining. This is a rendering of one of the larger units, and the construction is supposed to start in September. This will be the first phase of the project. 2 years ago, we embarked in a search for our next office space. We zeroed in our search on a 2-acre lot in East Austin because of the proximity to downtown while being a fraction of the cost. The project consists of 56,000 square feet of creative office and retail organized on 3 floors around a central courtyard. On the property is located an existing 1920s bungalow that we are converting into a destination restaurant in collaboration with a mezcaleria out of Oaxaca. The historic house will create a nice contrast with a modern mixed-use building. For this project, we have been combining all aspects of development, After the purchase of the land and the obtention of the building permit, we raised the equity required to securing lending, have marketed the project, and pre-leased to 50%. And next month, we will be starting construction. Other than small single-family spec project, this is the first development where we are fully integrated. We will be moving our office into the new building when the project is completed. Quite a few of our consultants, such as our civil engineer and structural engineer, have invested their fee in the project and are renting space with us. Along with our sweat equity, we have been able to reduce the equity raise significantly, creating a higher return. We will have to see that, obviously, since it's not built yet. Like our other projects, the building will have a strong emphasis on sustainability. The office is set in a park-like setting that can be rented for event or used by the tenant. Other than the proximity to downtown, we selected this site because it's located just north of a park from which an extensive bike trail system emanates. Our building will have bike storage, shower facilities, and lockers in order to encourage people to commute to the office on bikes. It is also located next to a transit line that connects Austin to other communities in East Austin. The interior will be slightly industrial, where the joist and metal decking will be exposed. We are adding wood paneling in the conference room and a few other spaces. The floor plan is organized in 3 triangles, sidestepping each other, around a lush interior courtyard where the restaurant is located. Surface parking is provided in the back to avoid disrupting the pedestrian flow in the front. Each space can be subdivided depending on a tenant's need. Our office will be located on the 3rd floor, along with other consultants related to the real estate industry. The 2nd floor will be oriented toward tech and startup businesses. Once construction is finished, we will try to stabilize the asset, bring the occupancy to 75%, then we'll be looking to selling the building to a REIT or institutional funds. There's a massive cutout in each triangle with this light well that allows us to minimize the footprint of the width of the unit and bring natural light from all sides. This Clubview Terrace apartment, and this is a project we started recently. We purchased a land in East Austin in January, and we are doing a project that will be in 2 phases. The first phase is a 65-unit, 9% tax credit that we want to couple with senior housing, independent living project next to it that will also have affordable component to it. We are currently in underwriting with the state for the tax credit component, and we will find out next week if we receive it. Important week. The affordable housing aspect is interesting in the developer mindset, not only because it is completely recession-proof asset class, but it's also because you get $1.5 million a year tax credit over 10 years that you can turn around and sell to a syndicator or a bank for 94 cents on the dollar, and so you get 13-something change million of equity injection in your project, and it basically negates the need of raising private funds, private money, which is the most expensive. So there's a good reason why a lot of people, a lot of developers are doing this, and you'll see it heating up these next few years as we are kind of at the 9th inning of this market expansion. So it's highly competitive, but Nonetheless, it's a good way to mitigate the ups and downs of the market. This is the view of the front part. The lower part is the affordable housing. It's a 5-story over podium. We can do all stick and brick for that, so it's a lower price point of construction. The senior housing or independent living in the back is 9-story over podium, and that will be a slightly higher price point for the construction cost. In conclusion, architects are best positioned to select the land, pick an asset class, lead the design team, and obtain authority approval. Filling the gap and understanding financial modeling, raising equity, and negotiating with the lender are steps well worth the effort. Architects acting as developers will have more freedom to pursue their designs. We currently are seeing a consolidation of services in the building industry, mostly led by large construction conglomerates. Architecture firms around the country will have to decide if they want to lead this transformation or follow it. Thank you. Do we have a set of questions?
When you say that you do the entitlement, what does that mean? What is entitlement?
Entitlement is just getting permits, building permit and site plan permits with the city.
That has its own cost to it?
Yes, it requires you to, one, have control of the land, two, have all of the consultant on board, you know, obviously creating the drawings, surveying, environmental studies, et cetera, et cetera. So it's typically a big effort. That's the riskiest because you haven't obtained the landing yet.
I have a question. How do you structure your arrangements with your consultants? Are they part of the investment team or are they basically consultants?
Yes. Is some of the consultant part of the team, of the development team. We ask, on certain projects, we ask if consultants are interested in being part of the development. And so we can structure it two ways. One, they can parlay their fee into a stake, and we typically give them a share of the Class B, or basically a limited partner, so they have no liability, but they have a stake in when the project, the asset is sold. Or they can invest additional monies if they want. So far, we've had a few of our consultants interested in parlaying sweat equity, therefore some of their fee or their whole fee in the project. And it's very beneficial for the development because the sweat equity, you have to raise capital to pay for this. So obviously, if they are putting sweat equity into the project, we don't have to raise this capital. And secondly, the lender, the banks, will be fine with us using this sweat equity toward the down payment of the construction loan. And so it has a double benefit, which, you know, again, can be a significant, which leads to higher IRR, higher return at the end of the project.
Do you show all your different structures of fees as separate entities? So you actually make the fee that a contractor would make, or you make the fee that a real estate person would make, and that is not blended into your cost as a given. You do the construction, you actually get a fee, and then a contractor would get to do the construction.
Yes, absolutely. That's the idea. So we can do that within one entity or several entities. The design and construction we keep under the same entities because there's some insurance benefit in doing so. The development, we often create a development entity solely for one project. And that's a very common way that developers work, and it's a good way to shield the liability, the future liability. On On the agent side, we are not providing the brokerage services. We just have an agent, real estate agent. So we make a portion of the commission and we partner up with brokers. It's important to have this distinction of entities because investor, when you're self-performing that much, they can become a little worried. You know, how can you do all of these different buckets? And so we make sure that we point out that the broker is not in-house, it's a different entity. But yeah, separating the total process into multiple entities make complete sense. It complicates your accounting at the end of the year, but
When you design the construction, do you pay yourself back with the soft draw when you get a loan, or do you just keep it in the equity?
both. So often we put the architect fee as sweat equity, as a stake of ownership. And by the way, as the developer, you're setting up your own fee for the architecture. So I'm negotiating with myself. It's a lot easier. So some is sweat equity, some when there's some critical moments in the development where you unlock cash. When the construction loan is obtained, you can pay part of sweat equity back or whole. You can draw a third of the developer fees. So the developer fee comes in 3 installments typically. When you secure lending, the construction loan, when the top out of the construction happens, and at CFO or TCO or CO, certificate of occupancy. And so you get a disbursement at each point. But you retain a stake, maybe 30% of the ownership of the building for when the asset is sold. And that's ultimately when you make the most of the proceeds of your effort. Now, there's also some brokerage fees, some commission. The listing side of the industry on the real estate it's kind of a joke. You know, we're doing a lot of the hard work by putting all of this content together and by getting exposure for the project and putting the project on a few websites like LoopNet and putting that content out there and waiting for the phone to call to ring is not a big effort. So we want to retain the listing side of the commission, which can be 2 to 3%, or if there's no tenant representation, 6%, and that's of the sales cost. As architect on commercial project, we may make 5%, that's pushing it on a commercial project, on the construction cost. The construction cost is sometimes half of the sales cost. So you imagine the drastically different aspect of the fee from the architect side versus real estate and sale. And I didn't want to become an agent, so I like architecture, but just trying to find a way to make a better proceed out of this.
You have an attorney and accountant as part of your firm?
Yes, yes, yes. Especially for structuring all of these entities. And we have multiple attorneys. I mean, most of that is subcontracted, but we have an attorney creating a PPM or legal investment writing, which is a securities attorney. And then we have all the other real estate attorney, et cetera, et cetera. It's America. Attorneys is the most important consultant. Yeah.
According to a figure you did your own house for $128 a square foot. Could you explain that?
We did our own what?
I figured out.
Oh, yeah.
$120
Well,
a square foot. You want to talk about that?
it was done 16 years ago. That's one. It was done for myself, so that's typically 25% discount. I gave myself a discount from the builder side. And yeah, I mean, this was shortly after out of college. I had a beer budget, so I had to be The other aspects, so I spoke a little bit of the efficiency of construction, having rigid module, eliminating drops by using 4x8 modules. The prefabrication allowed us to build a lot quicker. We did this house, which is highly customized, in 7 months. We use very cheap materials. The plexiglass is readily available, and birch plywood from Home Depot at $10 a sheet. So all of this, we had to be creative to keep that price point as low as possible. But I like that you looked at the numbers.
We do. We all do.
Like development and finance expertise in your firm, is your own interest or hire a developer?
Both. I mean, I think, all of us have worked with many developers over the years, and so we have been within the process, and we have a lot of control of it. But it feels to me that often when we were working for developer, we were pushed to the periphery. So it has been an interest of mine over the years, and a few others in the team. But we certainly had to fill a gap and understand what a NOI means and what's the right cap rate for a certain asset class. But we go as architects a minimum of 5 years in college, and then a lot of us have gone to a lot more than that. That component of understanding a spreadsheet is the fastest gap that you will fill. So if anyone is interested, it's well worth it to go to get a few books and sit in a few classes and try to figure it out on your own.
What has changed or not changed in moving into the Mexican market?
Sorry?
What has changed or not changed with regard to what you're doing moving into the Mexican market?
In Mexico, it's still a collaboration. We've had over the years a lot of students coming from Monterrey Tech, and we've met the faculty, and so we've had a lot of exchange with Monterrey. And we, just like we want to diversify the type of project we're doing and the type of services we're doing, we're trying to find a way to diversify ourselves geographically. And that's maybe one of the hardest components, because you have to spend a lot of time in these different communities to meet the right people, et cetera, et cetera. So this is an ongoing, and we hope to do this in Taiwan and in Europe. Potentially, I'm spending a lot of time in Vienna and other places to try to do that. Sorry.
You mentioned one of the projects that you were waiting to hear on the 9% tax credit. Does that trigger a go, no-go situation if you don't get the tax credit?
Yes, and that's a risky proposition with affordable housing, because you're making a huge effort. This application process is tedious, but you do your own self-scoring. So this extensive sets of matrix, you do your own self-scoring, and then you hope that the state agrees with your scoring. And so they have a lot of questions. They send deficiencies to you that you have to respond, and you make your argument to them. So it's a long process, and this is why not many people are doing it. But again, as architects, we understand all these components needed to score well, and so we have a leg up. One of the Lucero project we were doing with a developer who is wildly successful in affordable housing. He has 10,000 units. He does not know how to read plans. We have to do everything in 3D because he can't read 2D. And this happens over and over. We did all the work of the application. Our fee for this project was $120,000. He received a $13.8 million award. And we did a lot of the legwork for that as a concern. And this happens, I think, over and over. As architects, we do a lot of the grunt work, and it doesn't seem to me that the reward is proportional to our effort. Thank you.